Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
It was supposed to be a calm, routine interview, until one unexpected moment changed everything live on air. What happens when the most powerful pop star in the world sits across from a host who refuses to soften her questions, and neither woman is willing to blink? The lights inside the studio of The View burned brighter than usual that morning. The applause sign flashed. The audience, packed shoulder to shoulder, buzzed with anticipation. Everyone knew this wasn't just another promotional stop. When Taylor Swift walked out in a soft ivory suit, her smile polished and controlled, the crowd erupted into cheers so loud it nearly swallowed the theme music. Across the table sat Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Alyssa Farah Griffin, and at the far end, Sunny Hostin. Sunny's posture was straight, her hands folded neatly over her notes. She wasn't smiling the way the others were. Taylor waved, hugged Whoopi, exchanged polite greetings. She looked radiant, calculated, poised. Years of navigating cameras had taught her how to hold a room. But even she couldn't ignore the subtle tension hanging in the air like static before a storm. Whoopi opened warmly. "We're thrilled to have you here, Taylor." Taylor's voice was honey-smooth. "I'm so happy to be here. I've always admired strong women having real conversations." The audience clapped again. The early questions were safe: tour success, creative process, re-recording albums. Taylor leaned into storytelling, laughing lightly, offering charming anecdotes. The room softened around her. Even Joy seemed relaxed. But Sunny didn't interrupt. She waited. And when she finally spoke, her voice cut through the air clean and measured. "Taylor, you've built an empire on telling your story," Sunny began. "But critics say you sometimes control the narrative so tightly that dissenting voices get drowned out. How do you respond to people who feel your influence can silence others?" The temperature shifted. Taylor's smile didn't drop, but it changed. It froze. There it was. Not a question about music. Not about love. About power. The audience murmured softly. Taylor tilted her head slightly. "I think, when women speak strongly, it's often labeled as controlling." Sunny didn't flinch. "That's fair. But we're not talking about strong. We're talking about scale. Your fan base is massive. When you respond to criticism, even subtly, people can face intense backlash. Do you feel responsible for that?" Alyssa's eyebrows lifted. Joy glanced at Whoopi. The air felt thinner. Taylor's fingers tightened slightly over her knee. Years ago, she might have laughed it off. Today, she didn't. "I've never told anyone to attack anyone," Taylor said carefully. "I encourage kindness." Sunny nodded, but her eyes remained steady. Intent and impact aren't always the same. The audience let out a quiet "oh." For the first time, Taylor's composure cracked, not dramatically, but subtly. A blink that lasted half a second too long. A breath drawn sharper than before. Inside her chest, something old stirred. The memory of being publicly dissected. The narrative of villain versus victim. The constant demand to be gracious while being questioned. "I've spent my entire career being scrutinized," Taylor replied, her voice lower now. "When I finally learned to stand up for myself, it became a problem." Sunny leaned in slightly. "Standing up for yourself isn't the issue. The question is whether the power dynamic has flipped." There it was again. Power. The word hung like a spotlight pointed directly at Taylor's face. Whoopi interjected gently. "Now hold on, we're not putting her on trial." Sunny's tone remained calm. "Not a trial. A conversation." Taylor inhaled deeply. The audience watched her, not blinking. Millions more would watch later. "You're asking if I'm too powerful?" Taylor asked, her voice almost incredulous. "I'm asking," Sunny clarified, "if you acknowledge that with great influence comes unintended consequences." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Taylor's eyes shimmered, not with tears yet, but with something closer to frustration. "I write songs about my life. I share my feelings. If people connect with that, that's beautiful. But I cannot micromanage how millions of individuals behave." Joy chimed in, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, if you could, maybe you could get them to buy my book too." A few laughs rippled through the crowd, but they were nervous laughs. Sunny didn't smile. "Would you ever directly tell your fans not to target someone you've had conflict with?" Sunny pressed. Taylor's jaw tightened. "I have said countless times that I don't condone bullying." "But would you name it?" Sunny said softly. "When it happens because of something you've shared." Silence. The applause sign remained dark. No one dared clap. In that silence, you could almost hear Taylor thinking. The balance between authenticity and responsibility. Between protecting her art and protecting others from the fallout of it. Her voice, when it came, was steady, but tinged with something raw. It's exhausting, she admitted. Being expected to absorb every projection. I am not a corporation. I'm a person. Sunny's expression softened just slightly. And the people on the other side are people too. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap. Taylor blinked again. This time, her eyes did glisten. For a fraction of a second, the superstar vanished, and a woman, visibly emotional, sat in her place. I know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of mass hatred, Taylor said, her voice trembling faintly. I would never wish that on anyone. The audience broke into gentle applause. Sunny nodded once. Then maybe this is an opportunity. To say it clearly. The challenge wasn't aggressive. It was deliberate. Taylor looked down briefly, then back up. Cameras zoomed in. Social media managers across the country were already clipping the moment. I do not support harassment of any kind, she said slowly. And if my words have ever unintentionally contributed to that, I regret that deeply. A wave of reaction swept through the audience, some clapping, some whispering. But the tension didn't dissolve. Because this wasn't just about fans. Sunny adjusted her papers again. There's also the political layer. And just like that, the storm clouds rolled back in. Taylor's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in anticipation. She knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The studio lights felt hotter. The applause sign blinked uncertainly. And across the table, two powerful women, one commanding an empire of music, the other commanding a courtroom-trained precision, prepared for the next round. The audience leaned forward collectively. This wasn't promotion anymore. This was personal. The word political didn't explode in the room. It sank, slow and heavy, like a stone dropped into deep water. Taylor's shoulders squared almost imperceptibly. She had known this was coming. You don't walk into the view and expect the conversation to stay wrapped in satin. Sunny's voice remained composed, deliberate. You've encouraged voter registration. You've spoken out on certain policies. Some applaud that. Others say celebrities blur lines when they step into civic influence. How do you decide when to use your platform politically? The audience stirred again, less shocked now, more alert. This was sharper territory. Taylor's lips pressed together for a split second before she answered. I decide based on what affects people's lives in tangible ways. If something impacts my fans' safety or rights, I don't think silence is neutral. A small burst of applause came from the back rows. Sunny nodded. But do you see why some Americans, especially those who disagree, feel alienated by that? There was no hostility in her tone. Only persistence. Taylor crossed one leg over the other. Her heel tapped once against the chair rung, barely noticeable, unless you were watching closely. I understand disagreement, Taylor replied. What I don't understand is the expectation that artists should remain decorative. Joy jumped in, grinning slightly. Decorative? Honey, nobody's calling you wallpaper. Laughter rippled. Even Taylor smiled briefly. But Sunny didn't let the moment drift too far. It's not about decoration. It's about influence. When someone with your reach endorses a position, it carries enormous weight. Some feel that weight is unfair in a democracy. Taylor leaned forward now. The distance between them shortened, not physically dramatic, but symbolically charged. With respect, Taylor said, her voice steady but firmer, voters make their own decisions. I'm not pulling levers behind a curtain. Sunny's gaze sharpened slightly. No, but you move hearts. And hearts move ballots. That line hung in the air like electricity. Whoopi exhaled slowly. Alyssa glanced between them, sensing the tightening rope. Taylor's expression shifted again, not wounded this time, but resolute. So what's the alternative? She asked. That I have beliefs and never speak them. Sunny shook her head. The alternative is accountability for how those beliefs ripple outward. And you don't think I feel that? Taylor asked, a flicker of emotion breaking through. The audience sensed it immediately. This wasn't theoretical anymore. Taylor's voice softened, but it carried more force. Every time I speak up, I know I'm stepping into a storm. I've lost fans. I've received threats. I've had my safety questioned. But staying silent felt worse. Sunny held her gaze. Courage and consequence can coexist. There it was again, that courtroom cadence. Clean. Surgical. Taylor inhaled deeply. I don't claim to be perfect. I claim to care. A murmur of approval swept through the room. Sunny's next words came quieter, almost reflective. Care is powerful. But so is clarity. There are moments when your silence has also been criticized. The shift was subtle but sharp. Taylor's brow furrowed. You're referring to? There have been global issues, Sunny said carefully, where fans waited for you to speak. And when you didn't, they questioned why. The studio air thickened again. Taylor's eyes flickered downward, then back up. I don't believe in performative statements, she said slowly. If I'm still educating myself, I won't rush to tweet something just to satisfy headlines. A few audience members clapped. Others remained still. Sunny didn't interrupt. She let Taylor finish. I've learned that speaking too quickly can cause harm, Taylor continued. But so can speaking without depth. Sunny nodded once. So you're saying silence can be thoughtful? Yes, Taylor answered. Not indifferent. Joy leaned back. This is why I stick to complaining about traffic. The tension eased for a heartbeat. A fragile one. But then Sunny leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice just enough to make everyone lean in. Do you ever worry, she asked, that your narrative, your storytelling, frames you consistently as the wounded party? The audience audibly gasped. Whoopi's head turned sharply toward Sunny. Alyssa blinked. Taylor froze. The question wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was precise. For a moment, no one moved. Taylor's lips parted, but no words came out. Her chest rose and fell slowly. You write beautifully about heartbreak, Sunny continued gently. But some critics argue that the men, or even women, you reference don't have the same megaphone to respond. Does that imbalance concern you? The applause sign stayed dark. The room felt suspended. Taylor's eyes shimmered again, not fragile, but fierce. I write from my experience, she said, her voice lower than before. I don't write biographies. I write feelings. Sunny's expression remained neutral. But feelings can shape reputations. And so can rumors. Taylor shot back, more quickly than she intended. A ripple passed through the audience. There it was, a spark. Taylor exhaled, visibly trying to recalibrate. I don't name names, she added. The public fills in blanks. Sunny tilted her head. Sometimes the blanks are obvious. That landed hard. For a split second, Taylor's composure cracked, not into tears, but into something sharper. You're implying I weaponize my art, she said quietly. I'm asking whether you've considered that possibility, Sunny replied. The distinction was razor-thin. Taylor leaned back slowly, eyes locked forward, not at Sunny now, but some way past her. Millions of streaming viewers. Decades of headlines. Every accusation she'd ever swallowed. I have considered everything, Taylor said finally. I've overconsidered everything. I've rewritten myself to survive narratives I didn't create. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with intensity. I refused to shrink my voice to make someone else more comfortable. Applause erupted, loud this time. Some audience members stood briefly. Sunny didn't clap. She waited. When the noise settled, she spoke softly. No one is asking you to shrink. The question is whether growth sometimes means expanding empathy, even for those who hurt you. Silence again. That one didn't provoke applause. It provoked thought. Taylor's eyes locked back onto Sunnis. There was no smile now. No PR polish. Just two women staring across a polished glass table, both believing in their own moral ground. You think I lack empathy? Taylor asked quietly. I think, Sunny said carefully, that the world is complicated. And when you hold enormous influence, your story isn't the only one that matters. The words didn't attack. They pressed. Taylor swallowed. Her voice, when it came, was softer, almost reflective. I've spent my entire adult life being told who I am by strangers, she said. I tell my story so I don't disappear. The vulnerability in that line shifted something in the room. Even Sunnis' eyes softened. And maybe, Taylor added, I'm still figuring out how to tell it responsibly. That admission changed everything. The audience responded, not explosively, but warmly. Sustained applause, like a collective exhale. But beneath that applause, tension still hummed. Because neither woman had backed down. They had simply moved deeper. And as the cameras zoomed in tighter, catching every flicker of expression, it was clear this wasn't a feud. It was a reckoning. And the next question would decide whether this conversation healed or detonated. The applause faded, but the air never quite softened. Taylor sat straighter now, hands folded in her lap, the vulnerability of her last admission still hanging between her and Sunny like fragile glass. Across the table, Sunny adjusted her posture, not in triumph, not in retreat, but in readiness. Whoopi cleared her throat gently. "This is why we have these conversations," she said, trying to steady the emotional temperature. "Growth isn't comfortable." But the discomfort wasn't done speaking. Sunny glanced down briefly at her notes, then back up. Her next question wasn't loud. It was quiet enough to make everyone lean in. "You've spoken about reclaiming your masters," she began. "About ownership. About control over your art and legacy." That fight resonated deeply with people. But some artists of color have pointed out that they've been fighting similar battles for decades without the same amplification. How do you respond to those who say your struggle was treated as unprecedented when it wasn't? The audience reacted instantly. Sharp murmurs, a few audible gasps. Taylor didn't move at first. But something in her eyes shifted. This wasn't just about her narrative anymore. This was about comparison. Context. Privilege. "I never claimed to be the first," she said carefully. "I told my story because it was mine." Sunny nodded. "But do you acknowledge that your ability to mobilize public sympathy so quickly reflects a system that works differently for you?" There it was. Not accusation. Recognition. Taylor's fingers interlaced tighter. "I acknowledge that I've had opportunities," she replied. "I've also faced barriers." Sunny's tone remained steady. "Both can be true." Joy shifted in her chair. "We're getting into sociology now," she muttered half-jokingly. But no one laughed. Taylor's voice grew more deliberate. "When my work was sold without my consent, I felt powerless. That feeling was real." Sunny leaned forward slightly. "Of course. But the machinery that allowed you to fight back, legal teams, media leverage, loyal fans, that's not universally accessible." The weight of that observation pressed into the table between them. Taylor's jaw tightened again, not defensively, but thoughtfully. She wasn't being attacked. She was being challenged to zoom out. "I didn't orchestrate the support," she said. "People showed up." Sunny's eyes held hers. "Because they saw themselves in you." "And that's not valid?" Taylor asked, a flicker of heat returning. "It is," Sunny replied. "But it raises the question, whose stories get seen first?" The audience went still. The cameras zoomed closer. Taylor exhaled slowly through her nose. This wasn't a soundbite exchange anymore. This was laid. Complex. Dangerous in its nuance. "I can't apologize for connecting with people," Taylor said, voice steady but edged. "I can't dim my voice because the system is flawed." Sunny didn't hesitate. "No one's asking you to dim it. I'm asking whether you use it to widen the spotlight." The silence after that question was almost physical. Whoopi leaned back, watching both women carefully. Alyssa's hands were folded tightly in front of her, sensing the magnitude of what was unfolding. Taylor looked down briefly, then back up. The gloss was gone now. What remained was raw deliberation. "I've tried to amplify other artists," she said. "I collaborate. I donate. I mentor." Sunny nodded. "And that matters. But systemic imbalance isn't solved by gestures alone." That word, systemic, hung heavily. Taylor's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with something more personal. Fatigue. The exhaustion of being the symbol in conversations she didn't design. "You're positioning me as a representative of something bigger than myself," she said quietly. "I didn't apply for that role." Sunny's expression softened, but her conviction didn't waver. Influence appoints you whether you apply or not. The audience reacted, soft murmurs of agreement, a few scattered claps. Taylor swallowed. "So what would you have me do?" she asked, her voice no longer defensive, genuinely searching. "Issue disclaimers every time I succeed." Sunny shook her head gently. "No, but awareness changes how you move." That line lingered. Taylor leaned back, eyes briefly scanning the studio audience, faces watching her, judging her, empathizing with her. "When I was younger," she said slowly, "I was told to smile more, to speak less, to not upset anyone. I spent years trying to be palatable." Her voice trembled faintly. "And when I finally stopped contorting myself," she continued, "now the conversation is about whether I'm taking up too much space." The room felt charged again, this time with something more emotional than intellectual. Sunny didn't interrupt. Taylor's eyes shimmered. "I'm tired of apologizing for existing loudly." Applause erupted, strong, immediate, protective. Some audience members stood. Others wiped at their eyes. But when the applause died down, Sunny spoke again, softly. Existing loudly isn't the same as existing thoughtfully. The crowd quieted instantly. That line sliced through the applause like a blade. Taylor's eyes locked onto Sunnis. There was no hostility, only intensity. You think I'm not thoughtful? Taylor asked, her voice lower than before. I think, Sunny replied carefully, that reflection is ongoing. For all of us. The tension had shifted again, not combative, but deeply personal. Taylor's lips pressed together. A tear threatened, but didn't fall. I reflect constantly, she said. On my words. On my impact. On who I'm becoming. Sunny nodded slowly. Then maybe this conversation isn't an attack. A beat passed. Maybe it's evolution. That word changed the rhythm of the room. Evolution. Not indictment. Not cancellation. Growth. Taylor's shoulders dropped just slightly. The defensiveness eased. Not gone, but softened. You know, Taylor said after a long pause. It's easier when critics shout from Twitter. It's harder when someone looks you in the eye. Sunny met her gaze steadily. That's because accountability feels human face to face. The vulnerability in that exchange was almost unbearable. No snark. No interruption. Just truth colliding with truth. The audience sat silent, absorbing every syllable. Taylor finally nodded once. A small, deliberate gesture. I don't have all the answers, she admitted. Sunnis' expression warmed. Neither do I. And for a split second, the tension dissolved into something resembling mutual respect. But beneath that fragile understanding, something unresolved still lingered. Because conversations about power, privilege, art, and responsibility don't tie themselves neatly in television time slots. And as a producer off-camera signaled there were still minutes left before commercial break, everyone in the room could feel it. The most delicate question hadn't been asked yet. And when it came, it wouldn't just test Taylor's composure. It would test her heart. The producer's hand signal flickered just beyond the camera frame. 2 minutes until commercial. 2 minutes. In live television, 2 minutes can be harmless. Or devastating. Sunny inhaled slowly, as if weighing whether to leave the moment where it stood. Taylor's last admission, I don't have all the answers, still lingered in the air, fragile and human. The audience felt closer to her now. Protective, even. But Sunny wasn't finished. There's one more thing, she said gently. The studio stilled again. Taylor's eyes lifted, cautious but open. You've spoken about being misrepresented, Sunny continued. About narratives written about you that weren't fair. But there are also former collaborators who've described working with you as difficult. Highly controlled. They've said disagreement wasn't always welcome. A ripple moved through the crowd, quieter this time, but heavier. This wasn't about fans. Or politics. Or systemic imbalance. This was personal. Taylor's back straightened instantly. A subtle armor sliding into place. I care deeply about my work, she replied carefully. That can look intense. Sunny nodded. Intensity isn't the same as rigidity. The word landed harder than expected. Taylor's lips pressed thin. If someone felt unheard, that's not something I celebrate. But do you acknowledge it could be true? Sunny asked softly. The audience collectively held its breath. Taylor's gaze didn't waver, but her composure trembled just slightly at the edges. In creative environments, she began, choosing each word like stepping stones, there are strong opinions. Mine included. Sunny leaned in, not aggressive, just steady. Strong opinions can inspire. They can also silence. There it was again. Silence. The theme threading through the entire conversation. Taylor exhaled sharply through her nose. For a second, frustration flickered openly across her face. I've been silenced my whole life, she said, her voice tightening. By executives. By headlines. By people who decided who I was before I could speak. Her eyes shimmered, not from fragility now, but from something closer to anger. So yes, she continued, the emotion rising. When I finally had control in a room, I held on to it. The audience reacted with a low murmur, some nodding, some shifting uneasily. Sunny didn't interrupt. Taylor's voice cracked, not loudly, but undeniably. Because I was terrified of losing it again. That confession shifted the room. The superstar disappeared again. In her place was a woman admitting fear. Sunny's tone softened further. Fear can make us grip tightly. Taylor nodded once, jaw tense. It can. A long pause followed. Joy looked visibly moved. Alyssa blinked rapidly, as if fighting her own emotion. Even Whoopi's expression had grown contemplative. Sunny spoke carefully. Do you think that fear ever hurt people around you? The question wasn't accusatory. It was surgical. Taylor swallowed. Her throat worked visibly. For the first time since she'd walked on stage, she didn't seem to know what to say. The silence stretched, longer than television usually allows. Finally, her voice emerged, quieter than before. Probably. The word was barely above a whisper. The audience didn't clap this time. They just listened. Taylor blinked quickly, moisture gathering at her lash line. I've expected perfection, she admitted. From myself. From my team. From everyone. She let out a shaky breath. And perfection isn't human. Sunny nodded slowly. No, it's not. Taylor's voice grew steadier, though still raw. But I've also been in rooms where I was underestimated. Dismissed. Treated like a brand instead of a person. I overcorrected. The honesty in that sentence hung heavy. Sunny's eyes softened noticeably now. Overcorrection is still correction, she said. It means you're aware. Taylor gave a faint, almost broken laugh. Awareness doesn't undo impact. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sunny leaned back slightly, giving the moment space to breathe. I'm not here to indict you, she said. I'm here to ask the questions people wonder about. Taylor looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without guardedness. And I'm answering, she said softly, even when it's uncomfortable. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice grounding. That's what grown women do. A faint ripple of applause followed. But the emotional intensity hadn't dissipated. Sunny hesitated for just a fraction of a second before delivering what felt like the final thread pulling everything together. When young girls watch you, she said gently, they see strength. Independence. Control. What do you hope they also see? The question was different. Not a challenge. An invitation. Taylor inhaled deeply, steadying herself. I hope they see someone who's still learning, she said, voice trembling slightly. Someone who makes mistakes and owns them. Someone who doesn't shrink, but also doesn't stop evolving. A tear finally escaped, tracing down her cheek. The audience gasped softly. Taylor didn't wipe it immediately. She let it fall. I don't want to be untouchable, she continued. I want to be real. The room felt suspended in that vulnerability. Sunny's expression carried something close to respect now. Real includes accountability, she said gently. Taylor nodded. Yes, she whispered. It does. The producer's voice echoed faintly off camera. 30 seconds. The cameras zoomed in tighter. The audience sat completely silent, as if afraid to disturb the fragile honesty filling the studio. Sunny offered a small, sincere smile. Thank you for not dodging. Taylor returned it, small, but genuine. Thank you for not softening. And in that exchange, something shifted permanently. Not a victory. Not a defeat. But a crack in the armor on both sides. As the show cut to commercial, the applause finally erupted, loud, sustained, emotional. Some audience members stood. Others wiped at their eyes. But even as the music swelled and the lights dimmed slightly, the weight of what had just happened lingered. Because when the cameras came back from break, this conversation wouldn't just be a trending clip. It would be a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. When the show returned from commercial, the applause was louder than before. But it wasn't the kind reserved for a pop performance. It was the sound of people who had just witnessed something uncomfortable and honest. Taylor sat composed again, though her eyes were still slightly red. Sunny's posture was steady, but softer now, less prosecutor, more participant. The energy between them had shifted. Not resolved. Not erased. But human. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice grounding the room. I think what we just saw, she said carefully, is what happens when power meets reflection. The audience clapped, this time not nervously, but thoughtfully. Taylor inhaled, steadying herself. I didn't expect today to go this way, she admitted with a faint, tired smile. Joy chimed in, half grinning. Honey, neither did our producers. Laughter broke the tension, but it didn't dissolve the weight of the moment. Sunny turned slightly toward Taylor, her voice no longer edged with challenge but layered with sincerity. Conversations like this don't fit into headlines, she said. They get flattened. Simplified. Taylor nodded. They'll probably cut it into 10-second clips. A knowing ripple moved through the audience. And she was right. Even before the episode ended, social media was already dividing itself into camps. One clip showed Taylor's tearful admission. I don't want to be untouchable. I want to be real. Another isolated Sunnis-piercing line. Existing loudly isn't the same as existing thoughtfully. Hashtags began forming within minutes. Some praised Sunny for holding a cultural icon accountable. Others accused her of ambushing a guest. And thousands, maybe millions, began debating whether Taylor had been brave or cornered. Back in the studio, none of that noise had arrived yet. What remained was the echo of vulnerability. Sunny extended her hand across the table, not dramatically, just naturally. I respect that you stayed in the conversation, she said. Taylor looked at the hand for a split second, then took it. I respect that you asked the hard questions to my face, she replied. The audience stood this time, not in frenzy, but in acknowledgement. It wasn't a triumphant moment. It was a mature one. As the show wrapped, Whoopi thanked Taylor for coming. The cameras pulled back. The theme music swelled. But viewers at home weren't talking about the album promotion anymore. They were talking about accountability, about influence, about fear, about growth. By the time Taylor stepped backstage, her phone was already buzzing relentlessly. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Messages from friends, from her team, from people who had watched the interview live and felt every tremor. Some texts read, "You handled that beautifully." Others read, "That was intense. Are you okay?" She paused for a moment in the hallway, away from the cameras, away from applause. For years, she had mastered the art of controlling the frame, of choosing when to reveal and when to retreat. Today, the frame had widened without her permission. And strangely, she hadn't collapsed inside it. Across the studio, Sunny sat quietly in her chair after the audience cleared. One of the producers approached cautiously. "That was a lot," he said. Sunny nodded. "It needed to be," she replied. She knew the backlash would come. It always did when conversations cut this deep. There would be headlines framing her as combative, others calling her courageous. But she also knew something else. Silence would have been easier. And easier rarely changes anything. Within hours, clips flooded timelines. Comment sections exploded. Think pieces emerged dissecting every sentence, every blink, every pause. Late-night hosts referenced it. Podcast panels debated it. Fans defended. Critics analyzed. But beneath all the noise, something subtler had taken root. A pop icon had admitted fear. A seasoned host had acknowledged respect. Neither woman had won. Both had been altered. And maybe that was the point. The next morning, newspapers didn't focus on Taylor's outfit or album sales. They ran headlines about vulnerability, about power, about what happens when influence is questioned in real time. Some viewers felt protective of Taylor, moved by her tears and honesty. Others felt validated by Sunnis' insistence that influence demands reflection. And many, perhaps most, felt something in between. Because growth rarely looks glamorous. It looks messy, emotional, unsure, just like that studio had. And now, the conversation belongs to you. Was Sunny right to push that hard on live television? Or did Taylor deserve a softer approach? Did you see accountability or ambush? Strength or defensiveness? Evolution or overreach? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Your voice matters in this conversation.